Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our end of year webinar during Nature Discovery Week. I hope it's a little bit cooler for you and your students now, wherever you're joining us from. So this is our traditional end of year webinar. On the next slide, we've just got who we are talking to you today. So I'm Jess, I'm head of the Nature Park. I'm based at the Natural History Museum. And today I'm joined by Tom, who's also from the museum, and Fiona from our lead delivery partner organisation, the Royal Horticultural Society, RHS. And then we've also got our colleagues Laura and Tegan running the webinar. And if you've got any questions, then just pop them in the Q&A and they can answer them live or follow up later if necessary. So I'm just going to give a few general updates from the past year, and then I'm going to hand over to Tom to talk about our nature surveys, and Fiona's going to give her traditional summer holiday tips, which are really vital with these increasingly hot spells. So I've just got here a bit of a reminder of what Nature Park is. We're thinking that quite a lot of people here will be familiar with Nature Park. But if you're new especially, please do head to the website homepage and register your setting to get started on your journey. So what is Nature Park? It's all about getting children and young people with their educators out exploring your site, however small or grey it might be, following our 5-step cycle and using our tools to map your habitat, see what nature is already there, and then plan together for how you can best turn grey to green. And getting outside, being part of this globally significant biodiversity research project with museum scientists and taking action like this, it really develops nature connection, it improves well-being and develops all sorts of skills. It's also a great project you can all do together in your school community, and you know that it's all adding up to make a bigger impact. So not just on your site, but on a regional and a national scale. And we've now got a version of Nature Park just started in Canada and discussions underway with other countries. So it's even now all adding up globally. We've also got all sorts of curriculum aligned teaching resources on climate and nature across subjects. So going from early years EYFS right through to Key Stage 5. So do check those out. You can use, we've got filters on our resource library, so you can find resources that suit your students and your subject or interest. They're all quality assured, carefully curated from third parties and ourselves. On the next slide, we've got some of our latest stats. So we always like to share how uptake is going. And just a little note, we use the terms settings and educators often because Nature Parks from early years through to FE colleges and everyone else in between, that's what we use, so we capture everybody. So we've got now well over a third of all schools and colleges in England registered, and that's very nearly 40% of secondaries. So that's since we launched in October 2023. So we're still quite a young programme. We are still preschoolers, even though we might feel a bit longer in the tooth than that. We've got nearly 1,200 nurseries now registered. That's thanks to our early years bespoke package that launched last year. And we're so pleased with that because it's so important to engage the youngest really, really early in their lives. And then the next figure there is about the habitat mapping, and Tom's going to talk about that and the other nature surveys in a bit. So we've got young people and staff from over 2,000 settings. They've been mapping their habitats to know your baseline, and that adds up to that figure there, 25 million square metres, and we thought we must be topical, and we're very pleased this webinar is scheduled to finish before the kickoff later, but we've got that equates to around 3,500 World Cup football pitches, i.e. a big space, and that shows you how much scope there is for education sites across England to boost biodiversity. Next up, we've got a few highlights. So I've already mentioned the early years package, and do check that out if you work in or with early years on our website. It's been really, really successful and really taken up. You can also now click on our Nature Park map from the homepage, and you can see all the habitat and biodiversity data that's been collected by thousands of settings all over the country. And it's really interesting just to delve in there, and you can add different layers. We also received the independent evaluation of the first 2 years of Nature Park, which told us how well everyone was engaging with the programme and gave us ideas for future development. I mentioned the curriculum aligned resources. We've been focusing on maths, computing and the arts, so do see what's already there and more still to come. And after the early years focus, we're now looking at inclusivity and accessibility across the programme to ensure that everyone can get stuck in and connecting with nature. We've added a grassland plant survey to the pollinator count and iNaturalist tools. More on that from Tom in a minute. And just thought we'd mention, we've just heard that we've been shortlisted for Global Good Awards Climate for Good category, which I think is going to be announced in September. So fingers crossed for that. And then we've just picked out a few success stories. There are so many examples now. We've been adding loads to the website. There's a success stories section. Do have a look. You can filter by region and setting type to find examples relevant to you. We just picked out a few examples here. Could have been many others. First one there is National Star FE Send College in Cheltenham. They've been helping us with the grassland plant survey, advising us in general, showing us how they do environmental education, been really wonderful hosts on their site, which is a great example. Then we've got Inner London, Kenda Primary School, been creating wildlife corridors, particularly for amphibians, and then using those to reflect on their own pupils' life stories. And then Bentley Primary there, it's one of at least 2 nature park gardens we're aware of that have been named after David Attenborough, big friend of the museum, after his big birthday. So great work going on there as well. Then we've got a few big wins more generally for outdoor learning, climate and nature education. So I know lots of people on this call will have been following about the natural history GCSE being launched, the consultation being launched at the museum the other week. There's a deadline of 4th of September to respond. And we see this as complementary to the nature park. So nature park's all about all children and young people having opportunities to connect and learn from nature, whatever their age, setting, subject. And then that sets up students to take up the GCSE so they can further develop their knowledge. So they go hand in hand. Department for Education, who commissioned and fund Nature Park, and other government departments have been doing this as well. They've been citing the contribution of Nature Park in various wider policies because there's lots of different co-benefits, which is brilliant. And finally, as I already mentioned, Nature Park called Learning by Nature in Canada, which is excellent. So just last little bit from me is about climate action plans. So probably lots of those on this call, you've already got a climate action plan for your setting or something equivalent. And obviously the extreme heat last week with lots and lots of schools having to shut early or totally couldn't have brought home more the need for mitigation and adaptation. Nature Park can support you with this. We've got a dedicated CAP page because Nature Park's relevant to all aspects of a climate action plan. And then you've probably already heard of the other sustainability support programs, Climate Ambassadors, Sustainability Support for Education, and Let's Go Zero. Do head to their sites as well. And we've got advisors on the ground who work together. So if you contact any of our programs, they will help connect you up with the others. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Thank you very much, Jess. And yeah, just want to say hello to everyone. I hope everyone has been having a great year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the first ever Nature Park research paper. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about Nature Discovery Week and the nature surveys that we have on offer. So this first one, very, very exciting. I'm sure all of you have seen the blog that we have posted on the website. I don't know if maybe there'll be a link to the blog put in the Q&A for you. So we've got a blog out, so that gives a lot more information, but I'm just going to touch on a few things about the first ever Nature Park research paper. So loads of settings, as Jess mentioned, settings is the term we use. Loads of settings have been out there collecting data on their site and discovering a whole range of different things. And this is particularly evident in the amount of habitat mapping that has been taken place. For those of you that are less familiar with that term, habitat mapping within the Nature Park program involves you going out with your learners being the researchers, being the scientists, going out and mapping all the habitats you have on your site to make up a baseline habitat map. To then, when you're going on to make changes, you then use a different tool, which I'll mention slightly later, the tracking change tool. So these are your baseline habitat maps, your sort of starting off point. And as you can see, we've had a huge number of those maps that have been started. Over 2,000 habitat maps have been started, with over 500 of those complete. Nature Park, it presents a really unique collaborative, research program where you're collecting data on your site that you can use to make evidence-based decisions about what you want to do on your site and show what you've been doing. But together, this collective action, it's a huge data set that just would not be possible without you, without your learners, without everyone working together and getting involved. And this collective action forms the basis of this first research paper that's been started around the habitat mapping. So with this huge amount of habitat mapping data, we can really start to answer national questions that wouldn't be possible otherwise. We can start looking at what habitats are most found on school grounds. You might have an idea in your head of, well, most school grounds look like this. You might all have an idea, but without that data, how can we answer that question? Well, that's where all this collective action comes in. We can start looking at how much biodiversity might be able to be found in those habitats through other work that's going on in the museum and the work you've done. We can sort of pair that research together to really start answering those questions. And then also through that, which of these habitats are contributing most strongly to biodiversity? And by being able to answer some of these questions, especially that third question about which habitats contribute most strongly to biodiversity, we can then use that to help inform evidence-based decisions. So on your site, if you are seeing the paper, you're seeing, these habitats contribute the most to biodiversity. You can then start making decisions on your site. Well, how do we introduce some of these habitats on our site? Or do we already have some of these habitats on our site and we maybe want to look at expanding them or looking at some others? But then also nationally, we can be making recommendations of, if you're looking to increase biodiversity on your site, well, these would be some of the best things that you can do for that. And all that evidence comes from you. So to everyone, we would just like to say 2 words, and that is, next slide, please. Thank you. So those words, thank you very, very much for all the work that you've been doing. We've really, really appreciated it. All the feedback, especially that we've gotten, for those of you that have been with Nature Park for a bit longer, you might remember that we had habitat mapping as an app, but then through feedback from teachers, educators, students, we realized that that wasn't necessarily the most accessible way for people to be able to do their habitat maps. So we changed it to a browser-based tool. That wouldn't be possible if it wasn't down to yourselves giving that feedback, giving that constructive criticism. It's Nature Park's a developing program, so we're always looking to make it the best for educators that it can be and the best for students. So if you have feedback about anything ever in Nature Park, please don't hesitate to send it forward, because it's likely that someone else will probably have those same thoughts. So thank you so much for all the work you've been doing, for all the work you and your learners have been doing. And keep doing it. We're going to be moving on now to talk a little bit about the nature surveys, because there's a huge array of different things you can do, as well as habitat mapping. And we're making a spotlight on those this week in Nature Discovery Week. So you might be wondering, when is it? Well, it's this week. And this is a week where we're really trying to encourage, to head outside with your learners and to engage with the nature park surveys. It's not just limited to this week. When I talk a little bit about the different surveys, I'll talk about the time frame for them, but this is sort of a week that we're trying to spotlight those nature surveys. So all you need to do to be able to submit one of the nature surveys is you just need to have a site boundary. So if you've been on the nature park map or engaged with the nature park, you'll see those green outlines around different sites, and that's your site boundary. The reason we do this is because we don't want people submitting data from outside of schools, because that wouldn't give outside of schools, colleges and nurseries, because that wouldn't give a representation of what's actually going on across the educational state. So you just need to have a site boundary and then submit a nature survey. So once you've done that, you can go on the nature park map and you can see what everyone else has done. So if you're not familiar with the nature park map, it's a way for you to be able to visualize all the nature park data, all the different data sets, all in one place. So you can see, and we've been loving looking at it, different icons. So for the grass and plant survey, different icons popping up throughout the country. We've also got some digital badges for each of the surveys. So for each survey you do, feel free to download the digital badge. You could put it on maybe a newsletter, website, anything that you want to do with it. So yeah, we've got those available there for you. Next slide, please. So what are the nature surveys? Well, we've got three right now. We have got a pollinator count, and I should say for pollinator count and the next one, grass and plant survey, we've got two versions of each. So the pollinator count, it's been adapted from the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, UKCEH, so UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, who partner with us on the programme. Who run the Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, they've been involved in the creation of this pollinator count and the adaptation of it. It runs from April 1st to 30th September. So now's a perfect time to be getting out there and doing it. It's been tested with learners, just like all nature park resources. We've been out testing them with learners. And through that testing, we had developed two different versions. So to make sure it's accessible for all learners of all skills and abilities, we've got two versions, and you can see them right there. So the version on the left, there's a few less groups that you're dividing the pollinators into, and then the one on the right, there's slightly more groups that you're dividing the pollinators into. And it's about simply having the students looking at some flowers for a period of either 5 or 10 minutes, counting the number of different pollinators that land on their site. We were out doing it with year threes, actually on Monday and Tuesday, and it was fantastic to see them getting so excited about all the different pollinators that they were seeing. There's a couple ways that you can do it, and this applies to all our nature surveys. You can either do it directly online, and you just need to log in if you've got access to a tablet, to Wi-Fi, log into your nature park account, and you can do it directly online, or you could do it offline on paper. On each of the different pages, you can download the survey form, paper survey form. Just make sure that if you do that, you come back into the classroom, either with your students or afterwards, just submitting the results later. Next slide, please. For all of the nature surveys that we have, it's something we're very conscious of. We want everything to be curriculum aligned. We want nature park to fit seamlessly into your day, not something that you feel like you've got to do outside of curriculum time. Having things aligned with the curriculum is extremely important to us. And so we've been working on resources to support the nature surveys, to support everything. And here are just spotlighting a few that support the pollinator count. So we've got a presentation that we recently added that shows you how to do the pollinator count. So this is something that you could do before going out and doing it with your learners, sort of explaining how the pollinator count works. So maybe you could do that inside the classroom before heading out. For primary age students, we've got 3 different resources, all about bumblebees. It's looking at classification and life cycles. We've got an exploring data page, which has got data on pollinator counts that have been done at RHS and NH gardens, so museum gardens. So that could be a way of working with your students to look at the data that they might be collecting, or after you have collected your data, looking at that data compared to yours. And then we've also got a ladybird survey, which aligns with sort of the scientific attitudes part of the curriculum. Next slide, please. As Jess mentioned, we've launched the grass and plant survey this year. So we were really keen to have a survey that we put out that was available all year round, conscious of the pollinator count only available from 1st of April to 30th of September. The grass and plant survey is available all year round. It can be done on any grassy areas on your site, regardless of size. So even if you've got a small site with a small patch of grass, you can do it. But if you've got a large site with more grass, then you can do it as well. So again, trying to make things as accessible for everyone as possible. Again, it's been adapted from a national scheme, so the National Plant Monitoring Scheme. Again, we were sort of adapting it alongside UKCH and been tested with learners. So yeah, just trying to emphasize the rigor with when we're creating these things, that we're making sure we're testing it with learners of all different sort of skills and abilities and ages, to make sure we've got something that's available for everyone. And you can see the two different versions right there. So the version on the left is when in this part of the survey, they're looking for different indicator plants within their square. And with that grid, they're imagining that that grid is over their quadrat. So it'll be a 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter quadrat. And for each of those squares in the 4x4 grid where they're seeing that indicator grow, they're ticking it, and then they're counting the number of squares they've seen it in. And we've got an ID guide that's going alongside that. And then the version on the right, they're looking at the same indicators, but they're doing estimation of percentage cover of those indicators within the square. So yeah, something for all different ages and abilities. And as said, with pollinator count, you can do it directly online or offline on paper and then submit the results later. Next slide, please. Again, we've got resources to support the grass and plant survey. We've got another presentation like with pollinator count that you can have with your learners. For primary school students, we've got Leaf Vocabulary resource, which is getting in on working scientifically, plants, living things in their habitats. We've got an introduction to habitats resource, and then a grass and plants and soils resource, again, just spotlighting a few. And then for secondary, we have got a resource on grass and indicator species, and then grassland ecosystems as well. Next slide, please. We've also got iNaturalist as well. So iNaturalist is a great way to learn to identify wildlife with your students. It's about getting out there, taking pictures of wildlife, uploading them onto iNaturalist. We encourage you, if you're already using iNaturalist or if you're thinking about doing it, create an account that says NENP_, because that links it with Nature Park. You're uploading those photos of the wildlife found on your site. You're then making an ID suggestion yourself, or you're getting an ID suggestion from the iNaturalist community. So anyone can snap and upload a picture of wildlife. Just one thing to mention with that is make sure there's nothing inappropriate and there's no faces in it. So those observations can become then research grade and really provide valuable insights. Next slide, please. And one last thing to mention is the tracking change tool. So the tracking change tool, those of you who've done their baseline habitats, that's the tool where you're putting on all the changes that you have been making on your site. So whether you've added something or removed something, or you've changed part of your playing field, you can see in the image right there, you've let part of your playing field grow long and that's turned into a meadow. You can put all those things on the tracking change tool. And that's ultimately how, through the program, you can say that biodiversity has improved across the educational state by looking what's on the tracking change tool, by comparing the baseline. So yeah, it's critical to the research. I'm now going to hand over to Fiona. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm just going to finish off with a few practical hints and tips to help you look after your gardens and school grounds over the summer holidays. I just want to start by just thinking about watering itself. I'd imagine most of you who are here understand using rainwater is better than mains water. So hopefully you've got some water butts near your gardens and areas that you've got growing going on. So that's a great idea. When you're actually watering, if you can aim to get the water right at the roots and think about puddling around the plant, it's just a much more efficient way of using the water rather than spreading it around in the soil and the leaves where it will just evaporate off. It's just getting used directly by the plant. If you can water earlier in the day or later in the day, again, it's just slightly lower temperatures, so there's a reduced loss of water just to evaporation when water's getting spread around and it's in the heat of the day. And water droplets can focus the light and scorch the leaves. A useful thing to do is to, after you've watered, or after you think you've watered, just scrape away some of the soil around the area that you've been watering in. And sometimes you might be surprised that how shallowly the water has sunk through the soil. It can often take more water than you think to filter right down through the soil to get to the roots. And when soil and compost has got really dry, it sort of becomes waterproof almost, and it can take a while to get damp again and just soak all the water up. And I mean, I think as a gardener, when we've had hot weather, and then you get some rain, that's actually a good time to do watering, because the really dry, almost waterproof soil is getting wet again, and then the water is a bit more easily absorbed, and it can be, you get sort of more a sort of a better result for the effort that you're putting in from watering. And so after you think you've watered, have a little scrape, and even if it's a bit damp and drizzly, maybe just investigate. If you think, oh, it seems a wee bit rainy, I'm not going to worry about watering, but just have a little investigation and see how wet it actually is. Okay, we can pop on to the next slide. This is a great opportunity to connect with the wider school community. Trying to keep a garden going over the summer is difficult because if it's very dry and hot, the plants do need watered. But could you involve some of the wider school community, parents, grandparents, other relations or friends might be keen enough to come and help sustain the watering effort over the holidays? The other idea is you might have a local community space or garden, and then you've got the advantage of maybe getting people involved who are used to working in a garden over the summer and can sort of efficiently help with the watering, and just build up that relationship. As your sort of nature park is growing in your school, it's a nice way to connect with the sort of wider gardening community and sort of nature community round about. Perhaps your school run summer clubs, or you have an organisation coming in to run summer clubs over the holidays. Asking them if they might be interested in using the children and young people to help out with the watering might be a welcome suggestion. It's a sort of low risk activity, it's on site, and we all know that children and water, they love sort of messing about with that in the summer. So perhaps it could be a little bit of a joint effort there, making use of a summer club on site. And traditionally, we might take the class hamster home, but why not ask the community, the school sort of community, teachers, learners, other sort of friends and families to look after some of the plants, the indoor plants that you've maybe got, or some greenhouse plants. Just take them home for the summer and have a go at looking after them. And I'm sure a lot of you will know many site staff in a school can be keen gardeners themselves, and perhaps you could persuade them or encourage them to help out if they get a chance to use some of the produce. If you've got a fruit or vegetable garden going, you might just be able to persuade them to help out as you do the watering over the summer. And we can pop onto the next slide. So yeah, a couple of other sort of practical things to think about are if you've got plants in the ground or a large raised bed, you might want to think about putting some mulch down around the roots of the plants. It's a great way of sort of preserving the water in the soil and trapping water there so it doesn't just evaporate out into the atmosphere. You can use things like thick cardboard, old mats and carpets, bark, stones, or used compost, anything to create that sort of thick, kind of semi-permeable layer around the sort of root area of the plants. But one thing to just think about is it's really important that the ground that you're mulching is wet and the water is soaked right down through the ground to the roots. If you put mulch on top of dry soil, you basically stop more water getting in when it rains, or you vastly reduce it. So make sure before you mulch, you've really soaked the area, and do that little digging test to find out how deep the water's gone. Has it really soaked down into the soil? And then for things maybe like in a greenhouse, or if you've got pots, plants in pots, you could try, and you could practice this now before the end of term with your learners, just making a sort of wicking system where you use something like cotton shoelaces or sort of binding tape to be tucked into the compost of a pot, and then the cord or the tape runs into a water container, and that acts like a wick, pulling the water through into the drier soil compost. So you could try that out, and you want them sort of quite close to each other, and a nice sort of thick bit of tape or a few bits of cotton shoelaces. Give that a go, and then the plant can just sort of get the water when it needs it. And we can pop on to the last slide from me. Another sort of short-term-ish solution, potentially up to a couple of weeks, might tide you over. If you've got plants in pots, is to sit them in a shallow tray, just like in that photo there, and give them a good water, and even let some of the water soak through so that they're sitting in a shallow bit of water. You don't want plants to be sitting in deep water. You don't want the roots sitting in water for very long, because the roots need air and oxygen to survive, and if they're sitting in water, that it actually kills the roots. For a short while, a day or so, it shouldn't be too bad. So you could soak those plants and just let them sit in a little shallow bit of water, and make sure they're sitting in a shady place and out of the wind, somewhere sheltered. And you could even use some horticultural fleece, which you can get from a garden centre. It's just a very, very sort of fine material, or something like an old net curtain, even a sheet, a thin light sheet, and just put that over the plants, tuck it in so it doesn't blow away, weight it down with bricks, and that will just improve a little bit of humidity around those plants, give them a bit of shading, and keep them out of the wind so that they're not just evaporating and transpiring all the water out of their leaves. So that's a few little tips from me, and I'm going to hand back over to Jess.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tom, for telling everybody about the nature survey, such an important part of Nature Park. And Fiona, those were super useful tips, and not just for education sites, but any little garden areas. I know lots of people might have been thinking about their own pots and plants as well for over the summer. And I love the alternative to taking the schoolhouse to home. So thank you everybody for coming today. No, it's a busy time and obviously it's hot and we are competing with the imminent football. There's our mailbox and also a link to find your regional team if you're not in touch already. Do give us a follow on LinkedIn, and lots of other webinars, videos on various topics there on our YouTube channel. Keep cool and see you in September.